Hello everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of Phishing Countermeasures, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University, or CSU. My name is Guy Coward, and I'll be your MC for this and all other webinars in this series. And your mentor is Bianca Wirth, who I will introduce shortly. But before we begin, just some housekeeping. All webinars for this course will be held at 7 o'clock PM Australian Eastern Standard Time. Check your local guides if you're not from around here. With recordings made for those of you who cannot attend on a given night. Despite this, if you can make it, we hope you'll attend the live webinars and contribute to a collaborative learning environment. On that contribution, for those of you who've not used Zoom for webinars before, just a few words on its functions. We encourage the asking of questions during webinars and the use of chat. And there are two ways we encourage that. Along the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see some icons, things like Q&A and chat. And we ask that you direct all course content related questions to the Q&A section using the Q&A, clicking on the Q&A icon. So that's for questions directly relating to what Bianca's talking about or around what Bianca's talking about. And we ask that you send all administration type questions to the support team in chat. You can chat with panelists only or us only, the IT Masters representatives only, or to your fellow students as well. And you can do that by, you can choose by toggling through the drop-down box once you've opened the chat log. As I've touched on before, we recommend chatting with all attendees, as usually some very experienced students are around and generally prove to be most helpful, in addition to having great insights and having great discussions on the side of the webinar. There's a couple of issues. Some people find it a little bit distracting. If you fiddle around with the way you view Bianca's screen, which is being shared at the moment, sometimes you can turn off the notifications or have the notifications slightly less off-putting. And if you can't, it might just be an operating system problem. So I'm sorry about that. We've gone to Zoom before and haven't got much of a response. So apologies for that. For those of you who've never taken part in a short course with us, IT Masters is a training organisation that exists as a partner to CSU, who we work with to create and deliver a number of their master's courses. We also market these courses on their behalf and think and hope that the best way to do that is give some of it away free. If we do a good enough job, then students will be encouraged to enrol in the full masters if it suits them. But with that said, we hope that these courses stand alone in their own right and are their own reward. We want you to learn some useful information, have some fun, and hopefully make connections with your fellow students. Next week, Jason Howarth of CSU will be along to talk more about CSU specifically. So if you have any questions about that, maybe just hold on to them for now and he'll get to them. Diane is around from IT Masters to support you all in the chat. So thank you, Diane. She is also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, or the Moodle page, the course page, which is where you'll find all the other materials needed for this course, lecture recordings once they're up, discussion forums, lab info and slides. If you have any questions today or later on, there's some contact details on that page and you can contact us using those details. I'll hand you over now to Bianca. She's an expert in the human side of cybersecurity, a speaker and writer, in addition to a role in the industry as an educator about risk and awareness of risk to do with cybersecurity and physical security. She's also a guest lecturer for Charles Sturt University, and I'm very excited to see what she's got for us with phishing countermeasures. So could you please welcome Bianca?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that, Guy. I'm excited to be here tonight and to be delivering this phishing countermeasures course. This is an area that I think doesn't get a lot of attention generally. There's lots of news around phishing in the industry. Plenty of people have been duped by phishing attacks, but actually going out there and trying to find current books, I could only find about 3 books that have been written on phishing. So, and they were sort of all done in, 2003, 2005. So it's really quite strange that this is such a massive issue and there's nothing out there. So hopefully this course will go some way to giving you a bit of a taster and introducing you to phishing, and in particular email phishing, and some countermeasures that you can use, as well as education and awareness through phishing simulations of your employees. So hope you enjoy it. As Guy said, any questions, please ask, but we'll kick off now. Okay, so just briefly about myself. I've been in IT for just about 20 years, I think. I know it totally doesn't look like it, does it? But the past 5 years, or more than 5 years, 7 years, I've been focused on security. And I've got a number of technical, originally started as a techo, working as a, let's see, desktop support engineer, and then NT administrator, for those of you who are on here and remember that, and exchange administrator as well. So that was way back. And then from there, I sort of progressed into program and project management, and specifically focusing on security. So I ran my own business around security, program and project management for about 7 years. I now work for a large insurance company here in Australia, and I'm the Global Cyber and Physical Security Education Manager, as I mentioned. So just a quick note, as you can see on the side there, if anyone's heading out, for those of you who are in Australia, if anyone's heading out to the Australian Centre for Cybersecurity 2018 conference next week, find me there and say hello. It'd be nice to meet some people who are on this course in person. I'll be delivering a training course there as well around developing a risk-based education strategy. Okay, so let's do a quick introduction to our short course. So week 1, this week we're going to do an introduction to phishing. And week 2, we're going to cover off email, and we're going to go through, have a focus on lots of tools that you can use to analyze potential phishing emails in that week. Week 3, we're going to go through phishing simulations. So what are they, how to set them up, how to design them. And then in week 4, we kind of extend on week 3 by actually going through how you design and write a phishing education simulation strategy. So from the perspective that most of you would work in organizations or companies, and if you actually wanted to go ahead and implement phishing simulations as part of an education tool, then writing up a bit of a strategy potentially to put towards to your management team, or your CEO, or whoever it might be, that'll help guide you in that way. And then week 5 is your final online test. So there are 40 questions of multiple choice. And some of you might have already seen that we have sort of some prizes, t-shirts, custom designed t-shirts by a fabulous graphic designer here in IG, the insurance company that I work for. She designed 4 different types of t-shirts for people to win. So if anybody's interested, or if anyone tops the list, essentially in the scoring, I think we've got about 10 t-shirts up for grabs for those people, and you can pick which one you like, tell us your size, we'll get it printed to you and shipped out to you wherever you are in the world. So it doesn't matter if you're not in Australia, you can still in the running to win that. So that just adds a little bit of fun, and they're very unique. There's, by the end of this course, there'll only be less than 20 people who have those t-shirts in the world. So just some assumptions. I've assumed with some of this stuff that you've got at least 2 years experience in information technology, but if you don't worry too much. There are plenty of great people on the forums and myself who can help you out, explain terms, and help you understand things that you might not understand. As well, we assume that you would have a basic understanding of IT concepts such as DNS, quite common IT infrastructure components like servers and mail servers and stuff like that, and malware. But we will have a little refresher of things like how does a mail server work in week 2, just so that everybody's on an even playing field. Okay, so tonight we've got a few things on the agenda. We've got, let's see, we've got 45 minutes of this course, and there's lots to cover. So we're going to go through what is phishing, again, just to get a level playing field between everyone that's on the webinar here, and make sure everybody understands. And also, there's lots of different interpretations of what phishing is. So just want to make sure that everybody is thinking in the same way. Also, just a brief history of phishing. I don't want to focus on that too much, but just touch on that. The problem scale, so how big is it? Also, the phishing ecosystem. So when I came up with this course, I designed a poster that you can download that covers off all the different sort of the methodology for phishing, as well as the kill chain. So how do you actually, what are the countermeasures that you can use for that? And then phishing impacts. So the phishing impacts are good just from an awareness perspective, but also as support for any business case that you might take to your, your internal business team, cybersecurity team, management, whoever they might be, that you need to prove that this is actually a big area and you need to put some money and time and effort into ensuring that both your technology, your people, and your processes can cover off any damages from phishing. Also, phishing costs. So a little foray into what the cost of phishing, for example, what does it sell for? And some of you who are absolutely wonderfully keen have already jumped on and done some of your labs. And one of the labs this week, which we'll cover off a little bit later, is the we're going to jump on the dark web. So I have some things to tell you about that. We'll cover that off a little bit later. Okay. So, Guy, would you like to help me out? And I'm sorry for the people who are watching the recording, you won't be able to participate in the poll, but we're going to run, and I'll just turn the lights back on. We're going to run a little poll while I turn the lights on. So tell us where you're joining from. Our wonderful room has, the automatic lights turning off after a certain period of inactivity, and obviously I'm not moving enough. Okay, fabulous. Look at those results coming in. Lots of people from Australia. We've got some people from Asia, America, Africa, Europe, and other. So for all those people, it'd be fantastic to see your comments on the, introduce yourself on the discussion forum and let us know, where you're from. Everyone's got fabulous experience to share, no matter how much experience you've actually got in the industry itself. Everyone's got a perspective and their own little case studies. So, okay, so here's the results. So we've got 7% from Africa, 2% from the Americas. We've got 5% from Asia, 76% from Australia, because we are sort of in the optimum time zone for Australia. 8% from Europe and 2% from other. I'm interested to know where the other is. So if you want to put your country up there in the Q&A or
it's difficult, right? Like I didn't know whether to go Australia or Australasia. I don't know whether that counts New Zealand's and those sorts of things. Didn't know where to go. Anyway,
New Zealand, we think of Australians anyway. We love them.
Be careful what you say. If we have any Kiwis in here, they'll be blue murder.
All right, I lived in New Zealand for a little while, so you're part of me. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Me, on the other hand. All right, I'll stop sharing the results and off we go.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much, Guy. So as you can see, we've got a lot of diversity in terms of where people are from and the people that want to learn about this area. Thank you so much for everybody coming on. So let's start off, kick it all off with what is phishing. So I will apologise, the lights will go off every now and again and I'll jump up and you guys can have a little stretch while I turn the lights back on. Okay, so what is phishing? Essentially, techniques used by cybercriminals to con you into revealing sensitive information or installing malware on your computer. And that can extend to, for example, you'll see in the poster that we've got coming up, malware or stealing credentials, for example, to access your computer and then move their way through your environment, your IT or your technology environment, to get to rich sources of data where they can steal sensitive information. So this over on the little red circles there, I'm not going to say left or right because it's probably confusing, but it's probably opposite. But we've got 3 different types. We've got mass scale, and this is the most common type, although I'll touch on spear phishing in a second and whaling. So mass scale is essentially the type of phishing where these guys have got a database of your names, email addresses, or just email addresses, and send out, they could be emails, SMSs, they could call you, so they could have your phone number, or message you on social media. But there's no sort of personalization to the phishing. So they haven't said, "Dear Bianca." But spear phishing is quite the opposite. Spear phishing takes into account there's some sort of personalization. They've actually gone to some effort, even if it's a basic sort of, I've got your name and your email address and I've plonked your name into the "Dear such and such" field in the email, for example. But they've gone to some sort of additional effort to actually identify you or customize the content to you. So this is getting quite a large area, and they're getting quite sophisticated about how they do spear phishing. And one area of that is also business email compromise, which we'll touch on in our some case studies we'll go through as well. Whaling's sort of an extension on spear phishing. Whaling is going for the big fish in the pond. And that's sort of your CEOs, your CXOs, whatever middle title they might have there, and essentially trying to con them into taking an action. So that action, for example, a very common one is to pay an invoice or authorize the transfer of money, whether that be small or large sums of money. And you would think that people at that level potentially wouldn't be duped into those sorts of things, but it really does take some level of awareness to educate everybody, your executives, as well as your average employee on the floor about the different types of phishing and how they might get approached and what they might be asked to do. So as I touched on, there's multiple different ways that you can be phished. So this course, because it's so short and we've only got a limited amount of time, we're mainly going to focus on email phishing. But if you do have questions about SMS and USB and phone and social media, by all means, post those up on the forum. There's some interesting kits that you can get to USB phish people, for example, do a little drop of USBs in your local foyer, for example, and it'll send back a little ping to a dashboard that you have to identify that someone actually plugged it in, and you put enticing data file names on there, for example, salary.xls. And then there's SMS phishing. This is definitely increasing in prevalence. This is becoming more prevalent as well. Social media, so it kind of comes from 2 different areas where they either phish you, for example, via email and take control of your social media accounts, or they try to approach you with their own, obviously fake accounts on social media to take an action. And then phone as well. So it's SMS phishing is often called smishing. Phone is often called vishing, if you hear about those as well. And I just made up US vishing just for the hell of it. So just to keep it all, in line. All right. So a very short, I'll kind of skip over this, but you can have a read of it later in terms of the historical timeline of where phishing came from. Essentially, it came from, there's a paper in your references for this week, and it was written by one of the original scammers of the AOL customer service scam back in 1994-95. And they sort of write about, and it's an interesting paper because it's not written in a technical way and it's publicly available. So you can have a read of it, and he or she, not identified, tells you about how they actually went about scamming AOL customers of their credit card data by pretending to be support people for AOL. So for those of you who are too young to know, AOL was a very, and I believe they're still around, but they were extremely popular back in the 90s and early 2000s as a internet provider, an email provider, and sort of a whole of service provider. And then we sort of moved through the 90s and 2000s. So people, the media start mentioning the phishing through the late 90s. Then the first payment system is targeted, called eGold, in 2000, 2001. They're no longer around. And obviously people are getting hold of mass mailers, and that makes their job so much easier to be able to, target, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at a time. 2003 saw an interesting change where cousin domains start being registered. So, for example, PayPal as opposed to paypal.com.au or .com, whatever it might be. So their cousin domains are ones that look very similar to the original, but they're not obviously the original. So there's other things start happening around 2004 in terms of pop-up windows for phishing on websites themselves. The first spear phishing attack happened in 2005. 2008, this guy sent 27 million spam messages and gets $711 million from Facebook spam messages. He went to jail for 2.5 years and paid $310,000 in damages, which seems pretty light on to me, but you know, unfortunately, legislation, as you'll find, doesn't catch up with the technology or anywhere near as fast as it should. And there's quite a lag between what people get penalised for. A couple of big RSA hacks happened, for example, happened. The Sony credit card, so that sort of was a really big one that happened, 10 million people. And then there's a few more that come along. 2014, IoT, so Internet of Things devices started to send spam emails as well. So Internet of Things devices, your fridge that's internet enabled, your air conditioner that's internet enabled, for example, can be controlled and used as part of a botnet, essentially an automated sort of robot network that can send out or use its processing power to send out these phishing emails, for example. And 2017, a couple of ones that we'll go through in case studies is Google, Facebook, and Alberta University. So we'll touch on those a little bit later. Okay, so just to give everybody, again, level the playing field. This is the common spear phishing email. This is one that I got. They went to some effort to identify, I'll just turn on my little spotlight so you can see where I'm pointing here. So essentially they went to some sort of effort to, you know, customize the subject line. They actually had the attached document which contained malware, but it's pretending to be an invoice here, and then they put it with my name. That's so easy to script in terms of, you know, subject line, replace, you know, username or name with the person's name, and then replace the document with the person's name, and then attention to Bianca Wirth. So those things are all easy to script in terms of trying to dupe people. So these guys, like I said, have a massive database, they send it out, and they customize it to make it more authentic. And that's what we're going to learn about when we do our phishing simulations as well. But a common thing that they want you to do is ask you to click or action something. As you can see, it's saying we're contacting you to alert that, you know, despite multiple notices, there's an unpaid balance. And of course, when I first received this, I was running my own business and I regularly received invoices. So I sort of went, oh gosh, who was this and why didn't I pay this invoice? I didn't pay for any service like this. So that people start questioning as soon as they start receiving phishing emails. There's a little bit of panic inside. And that's exactly what these malicious actors are betting on, is to create that sense of urgency and to get you to act quickly without thinking a whole lot. They'll use scare tactics, so they go on to say, you know, blah, blah, if the entire amount as set above is not cleared within 3 days, we'll start legal action without caution for a court warrant commanding payment. Sounds all very official. And we may begin insolvency proceedings. Not exactly the right context there, but anyway. The costs of litigations must also be paid additionally to the debt. And then they've said that the letter is being sent to you with respect to the PDPAC. Again, all sounds very official. Described in the civil procedure rules, no such thing. The court has the power to sanction your continuous failure to take action. So again, all scare tactics and mostly all fake as well. And then the thing that you do at this point is stop and think, and that's what we teach our employees, is to stop and think about things before you rush and open the attachment to see what is this, or click that link and see where it goes and find out, you know, do some more investigation. Just stop and look at some of the factors, for example, like the sender address. Do you know that person from @bigpond.com? Well, I've never done business with that type of person. I'd never had that amount in services that I had to pay. This is all fake. And so are the phone number and address details. So for example, in Australia, there's no phone numbers that begin with 13433188. So a little bit of open source intelligence gathering on the internet and a quick check, and you'll find out that all this stuff is fake. But that's just an example of, you know, a very common spear phishing type of email, a very popular one. Attach an invoice, get them to open it. If you've got macros enabled and installs malware, maybe silently in the background, or does some other malicious action. So we'll go through those malicious actions very soon. Okay, so next up is we're going to go through the phishing problem scale. So let's take a look at the scale of the problem. This one here is from APWG. Oops. One moment. It looks like we've just lost our screen sharing.
Yeah, well, we've got a close-up now.
Oh no, not too close. I believe at the optimum time, our IT team have decided to deploy some patches, and my office is now updating.
Fantastic. Well, perhaps I will share my screen and put.
Sure.
How long do you reckon the patch will last?
I'm hoping only a couple of minutes. I won't say anything nasty about
All right. Well, maybe we'll answer some questions then. Okay. Many questions about the flashing in the chat, and it's all rather upsetting. But in some operating systems, people will be getting notified, and it's quite off-putting about each individual chat that comes up. My advice for those of you that are getting quite upset by it is to actually open the chat and minimize it as much as possible in your Zoom window. Another option is, if you have two screens, to just put it on another window and ignore it altogether. But other than that, there's not a lot we can do short of disabling chat altogether. And I think once the chat dies down for new courses, it's actually a really useful tool. So I won't be doing that, I don't think, often. If there's sort of tangential discussions, I don't want to stop those. So it's unfortunate that it flashes like that. But yeah, there's not a lot we can do. I'm sorry. But we've got some questions from Amar. Is there any sandboxing for US phishing?
Sandboxing. So for example, if you want to test it, probably just need a little bit more information about the sandboxing. So in what context? You want to develop a USB phishing campaign as part of this course, and do we have a like a sandbox for you to play in? If that's the question, the answer is no. So the two sandboxes that we have, the two virtual machines that you're going to download as part of the labs. The first one is to access Tor, and it's to access the dark web, part of this week's lab. And then in week 3, the virtual machine that we've got there as well is, again, just for the email phishing testing. And we're going to use a tool called GoFish for that.
Beauty. Heidi has asked, many targeted phishing campaigns come from data breaches where customer details become available to scammers. Mm-hmm. Is this the majority of phishing or the minority these days? For example, LinkedIn scraping or Facebook scraping?
There's a huge amount of everyone's email addresses out there on the web. There's a great website called Have I Been Pawned or Pwned. So it's Have I Been PWN, I think it's ed.com. I'll confirm that and I'll post it to the forum. And you can just go and see what data is actually being exposed about your email address. You type your email address in and go off and have a look at that. But in terms of the data, people can go from absolutely anywhere. There's and what we should do is probably hold that thought for a second, because I've actually got a list of common places on the poster that I'm going to show in a few slides.
Okay, Ryan has asked, what's the official term for phone or calls or SMS phishing? That was smishing, was it?
Smishing for SMS, vishing for voice calls, so phone calls.
Alrighty.
US bishing I just made up.
That works. All right. Well, maybe now we've got your screen again, so maybe we can keep on going through, and then maybe at the next change of topic, we'll have a run through some questions.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, so scale of the problem. So essentially, this is some data from a company, or from an organization called Anti-Phishing Working Group. If you go search for them, I think it's apwg.org. They've got some great reports, some intelligence that you can use, and they gather up statistics from a number of different partner organizations. For example, PayPal is one of their partners, for example, and a number of sort of European-based organizations. I think there was like a few European banks and things like that on there as well. But they've sort of come up with some figures from January to September 2017. I didn't have the full year because they hadn't released their latest report yet for the last quarter. So essentially what they've said is, 888,543 unique campaigns over those 9 months. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of the phishing email reports. There was another report, and these are all in your references if you want to go have a look at the actual reports as well. So in the Phishing Response Trends by Fishman, they're a phishing simulation organization, software company. They had the number of suspicious emails weekly, and I sort of classified them by Australia, Singapore, United Kingdom, South Africa, and United States. So if you look at this graph, and for example, in the Australia area, and I'll see if I can get my little thing here. If you can see that arrow. So in Australia, for example, 20% were receiving up to 50 suspicious emails per week, and then 24%, 51 to 100, 19%, 100 to 500, and so on and so forth. So you can interpret and have a look at those results. So there's some interesting, I guess, information that goes behind this as well. Whoops. Okay. Next, where are they coming from? So Kaspersky have a fantastic report that they release every quarter around spam and phishing. So there's spam, and that's sort of the top level. Spam can be malicious or non-malicious, but phishing is the sub-level where it is a malicious, they have a malicious intent behind the phishing that they send out, the communication that they send out. So as you can see here, the sort of top phishing and spam emails were coming from China, Vietnam, United States, India, and Germany, as well as other. So there's a large percentage there that are also coming from other. Oh, and there's our lights. 1 second, where are they sending to?
I think you should just flail wildly while you're doing the delivery. Just like one of those blow-up dolls outside of a car yard. Or
Let's not go there.
Performance art.
Oh, all right. Okay. Okay. So who are they sending?
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, not that one.
Oh, right.
You know the floppy monster machines.
Totally got it.
Good.
Yeah. I'll leave that there. So where are they sending to? So the majority are sending to Germany, China, Russia, and Japan. So there's a lot of inter-country sending going on, as well as a large proportion from other as well. Okay, so this is the post that I was talking about. This is the phishing ecosystem. Essentially, along the top, we've got the methodology. So how they, the malicious actors identify their targets, how they can deliver it, how they engage with you, what the result is, and the actions that are taken, and then the end results of all those things together. And then along the bottom, we've got the kill chain, and that tells you from a technology, process, and people perspective, the things that you can do in your organization to help reduce the chances of phishing emails getting through. Now, nothing is ever going to be 100% secure, and nothing is ever going to 100% stop everything. So that's why if you put all these things together, or as many as you possibly can in your organization, can afford to have the scope and the time and the resources to, the better off you're going to be. And I've highlighted with little sort of orange dots in this poster, the specific things that if you implement those specific preventative measures before you have a phishing attempt, you'll have a better or improved risk profile. So it'll lower the chances of something very malicious or the extent of the issue when it actually occurs. So for example, along the top of the kill chain, we've got people. So lots of things around education, setting up simulations, and the particular topics that you can focus on. And from a process perspective, we've got things, for example, in Preempt, like employee monitoring policies, domain monitoring service. So monitoring domains that are quite similar to your organization's domains. You can actually set that up with your ISP or your domain provider. Having a social media use policy, so people, for example, taking photos of their security access cards and posting them on Facebook, or posting screenshots or photos of them in front of their computer and their password is pasted on a sticky note on the monitor. I've definitely seen that before, not in IG, but I've definitely seen that one. There was one that was actually going around Twitter recently. And then from a technology perspective, that area there, for example, in the preempt side of things, you could do preemptive domain registrations, for example. So preemptively register cousin domains that are similar to yours to stop malicious actors from doing that. So that just gives you a little taster of what the different pieces are along the bottom. So if you want to go through those, we're going to focus on particular bits of that during the course, and I'll highlight those in a sec. But coming back to the question that was asked before around how do they acquire all the contacts. So we've got that first section there where we've got target identification. And if I just highlight that for you. So a target identification here. So we've got acquire contacts. So they can get it off the dark web. That can be bought. It can be also pasted to things like paste in sites. So paste in sites are anonymous sites that are online that allow people to paste data and have it not be attributed to them. People can purchase it legally, your data, every time you enter a competition to win something, those fantastic, win a house or near a beach or something like that get advertised at 3 o'clock in the morning on television, and you go and ring up and put your details in. If you actually listen or read their terms and conditions, as well as any websites that you signed up for, if you actually read the terms and conditions, a lot of them are sharing your data, and that's what you're agreeing to when you actually participate or sign up. And then they go off and they sell that data, or it gets leaked, for example. So that's areas like there's online directories of people go and scrape websites and pop it up into directories of contacts. We've got things like, as I mentioned, lottery and participation competitions, marketing databases. Again, these people do intelligence gathering on your organizations. So we've got that from a marketing perspective, but also from a more advanced perspective where they're really targeting your organization. They can do open source intelligence techniques. So that's OSINT for short, where they go about and identify particular target employees that they want to approach. Sometimes getting your email addresses is just as easy as guessing it. For example, a lot of organizations, in fact, most organizations have a standard email format, and it might be first name dot last name at yourcompany.com. So that's super easy to guess. For example, when I first started at IAG, the only place I announced it was on LinkedIn, so obviously just added it here. I'm working here now. And within about 2 weeks, that data had been scraped, and they had guessed my email address. Obviously, I hadn't published it anywhere. I'd checked my privacy and security settings on LinkedIn. But it's quite easy to guess the format of email addresses and send people emails, or they can test them. So they might send test emails to see if it actually works or bounces, for example. And then they validate their data that way. And obviously, they can steal contact lists, various social networks who shall remain nameless, also scrape your contacts as part of their terms of conditions of service. So for example, when they prompt you to, hey, invite more people and let us look at your contacts, they're actually taking all that data. And some of the settings in there, once you become a connection with someone else on these social media sites, they can see your contacts. So that's one way that people can get to as well. So that just gives you a little bit, hopefully that answers the question about how people get the data. There's endless number of ways, but there's sort of some very common ways that people can get your data. So if we just keep going, we've got, let's see, this week we're kind of covering end results. As I said, we don't have a lot of time in this course to cover absolutely everything in this, this chart or this poster, but hopefully it gives you an idea of areas that you can work on. Week 2, we're going to focus on sort of down in the email side of things. So we'll touch on a little bit on DKIM and SPF, as well as the incident response process. So how you actually analyze an phishing email that's come through and what tools you can use to do that. And then week 3 and 4, we focus along that phishing simulations side of things around the education space. So hopefully we've sort of touched on a little bit of, a little bit technical, a little bit education, and a little bit of introduction around what it is that you need to know. Okay.
Maybe jump into a few questions because we've got a few going around.
Sure.
Andrew's asked just a quick one. Why Germany? I think that was with the Kaspersky, where they come from. Was there a lot of Germany?
Yeah, so, well, there was lots coming from Germany and being sent to Germany, and I cannot tell you exactly why that is, to be honest.
Worth researching and checking on the forums.
Yeah.
Okay, just a quick question in general about slides for this course. Is it all right if people use your posters and your graphics for work? If they put them up on a wall or something like that? Beauty.
Yep, that's what the poster's for. It's so that you guys can take it and use it and have sort of a simple model to follow. Hopefully it's simple.
Great. Okay, question from Dennis. We recently ran phishing training within our organisation. However, it was restricted only to the IT division, and that's it. The content was very tech savvy. Do you find from your experience that a lot of times phishing training is designed to be complicated and it never reaches those non-technical end users? And are they the ones that really need to understand it?
Yes, well, it's both. So you need to, so hopefully a course like this goes some way to covering the technical side of things. So I guess the technical side of phishing, and but then you really need to focus on the user side of things. And that needs a particular, we're going to touch on some of those things, like things that you can do and tips and tricks and best practices and ideas in week 3 around that. So yeah, it depends on your approach to education, but it definitely needs to be both technical and the end user. The end user are the last, like they're the front line for stopping phishing emails. Once your technology fails and your processes fail, the people are the last bit. So they definitely need to know, and they need to know in a very simple way, and it needs to be super easy for them. So we're going to touch on some of those tips and tricks about, how can they easily report phishing emails. And I'll cover a little bit about how we did that and some best practices around that in week 3.
Okay, there's been a little bit of chat about Kaspersky and whether they, the extent to which they have ties to malicious Russian organizations. Have you got any general comments about Kaspersky or just in general veracity of, I guess, these sorts of reports?
I cannot comment. I don't have, I don't have the the legal capability to comment on what Russia may or may not do, what Kaspersky may or may not control, and what data they may have. But I do find that their reports are interesting, to say the least, and they do provide some great insight on phishing, whether they, whether that, and the data that they've actually provided is fairly solid in terms of if you compare that to other data that comes out of other vendors as well. So I believe it's genuine, but other than that, I can't comment on the whole Russia state thing. Great.
Okay. Brendan has asked, has any government considered legislating against the trading purchase of credentials between public entities and forums where the credentials are given for a specific purpose, like competitions, but then on-sold after being used?
So there's, we are going to touch on it. I'm not sure if this is this week. I think it's next week. We touch on the Spam Act 2003. Yes, it's definitely next week. And it is supposed to put in, there's that control in place to stop people from spamming people and phishing people. But of course, these people are malicious actors. They'll do what they want essentially with your data once they find it. But I haven't heard of, to specifically answer your question, I haven't heard of anything to stop people from, pasting this data on sites or anything like that. And not only that, the people that paste this data, or it might get hacked, so they're not intentionally losing this data, hopefully. So yeah, there's a whole range of different factors to take into account there, but there's not specific legislation around that.
Alrighty, thanks a lot. Maybe we'll keep on going. And if you're running a bit short on time, maybe just keep on going. And if anyone needs to go out, we'll let them know how much longer we're going to run. And if they do need to get out, we can always use the recording later. The recording, by the way, folks, will be up 24 hours after the webinar. Okay,
fabulous. All right, impacts. Let's whiz through impacts. So we've got personal impacts. So we've got, what happens to people when they actually are the subject of a phishing attack. So obviously you can lose money. There's potential psychological damage to people. Sometimes people who are phished, and just from a individual perspective, it can take, and their, for example, identity is stolen. It can take them upwards of 2 years to get their identity back and prove that they are who they say they are. And not the malicious actor. So it can cause a lot of mental anguish for people who are in these situations. Obviously, it's also an invasion of privacy. There can also be, although it's definitely low on the case study side of things, there can be physical harm for people as part of this, defamation, and obviously a lot of wasted time. So just some quick stats, and you can have a look at this. I've got this in the readings and references as well for this week. But ScamWatch in Australia, that's one of our government organisations, agencies, found $90 million was lost, and that's just the data that was reported to them. So that's not including all the stuff that didn't get reported, and mainly they're consumer focused, so one-to-one individual to government agency as opposed to corporate focused. So they've got 161,000 reports. And as you can see here, this is sort of a grid of the number of reports and the amount lost over that 2017. So if we keep going, one of the second most popular delivery method of scams was emails, and the first was phone. And then in top scams by reports, phishing topped the list. It was definitely the most popular, although some of these also might fit in a little bit of phishing as well. For example, they could be the result of phishing. So yeah, there's definitely sort of almost, what are we looking at? 25, 30,000 reports of phishing out of those reports that they receive. So then from there's also, if you think about it, there's broader impacts to the economy, politics, and a country overall. So there's an impact to the GDP. So there was a Japanese study, it's really interesting, I put it in the references readings, that found the very existence of scam messages took quite a large amount off the GDP, so 0.1% of GDP, which is equivalent to around about Australian billion dollars. And also impacted labour productivity, which they didn't take into account with those figures. It also influences consumer buying behaviour. So if people receive, for example, if you think about it, people receiving phishing emails from their favourite stores, it's going to affect people's consideration of actually buying online and the safety of that. You get scammed once, I'm not going to go do that again, even if it actually, it wasn't the company that they usually buy from. It was a scammer pretending to be that company. So loss of intelligence as well from a broader country perspective, and a threat to national security sometimes, and an increase in crime rates, right, as well. So here's one really good example. I love this case study for all the wrong reasons. Apparently Syrian hackers, allegedly I should say, Syrian hackers essentially sent a malware through a phishing email. I love how in the thing here they said the hackers, whoever they were, got access to the AP account, so Associated Press, they're a large news organization, by sending malware through something called a phishing email that I love. And the hackers sent this innocent-looking emails to their staffers, and it urged them to click on a link, and it essentially it was a phishing email. They reset the credentials to their Twitter account. They posted a tweet that essentially said that the White House had been bombed, or there'd been 2 explosions at the White House. And within that period, that shortly thereafter, there was a 143-point fall in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. after that was published. So that can just show you the, broader, much broader impact that this sort of thing can actually have on a company. So we'll just touch on briefly the societal impacts as well. I mentioned and touched on before how, it influences our biases and our prejudices. So who can we trust? And also our friendships and relationships. So once you've been stung, you sort of start, scrutinizing that a lot more. There's an increased likelihood of people deleting valid emails and communications. And then people's responses to also things like disasters like humanitarian efforts, which are like a gold mine to, malicious actors. As soon as something happens, for example, even straight after 9/11 and big events like that, hurricanes and, floods and things like that worldwide, they've been on it and sending out emails purporting to be from the, supporting charity and asking for money from people. And people, put their money in and think they're doing a good thing, and then they find out that they've actually been scammed. So you can see how this also would affect people's response to things like humanitarian efforts as well. Okay, so commercial impacts. So from a corporate perspective, obviously it has an impact to employees, waste their time, they don't like it. Spam is the bane of everybody's life, but there's bigger things as well, as in terms of if a company was actually hit and for a lot of money, there could be redundancies, there could be a direct loss of profit, you could see an effect on your stock value. It's going to take time and money to remediate. For example, would you have to, if you have a data breach as a result of a phishing email or whatever it might be, SMS, will you actually have to put on additional customer service staff to cater for the influx of people who are calling up and asking what happened and trying to get assurances that their data is protected? And obviously there can be legal action from people as well. You can lose your trade secrets and IP, so IP as well. And then you've got a loss of reputation and defamation, loss of time, critical system disruptions. It goes on and on and on. You can lose customers and market value. There was an actual interesting report that found that just generally, not phishing specifically, but just generally, the average time to resolve a cyber attack was 32 days, and the average cost was $32,000 a day, taking into account all these factors. So that essentially was over $1 million in 32 days to resolve a cyber attack. So here's a couple of good and interesting case studies. You can go and have a read of these in your references. So for example, Alberta's MacEwan University lost $11.8 million in phishing emails. So they were sent fake, here we go again, they were sent fake invoices. Then another one here as well, we've got, bogus boss email scam costing firms millions of dollars as well. So I recommend you go and have a look at those. One sec, I'll do one.
Cue flailing arms. Okay. Well, nowadays, just a quick question from Rob about the previous slide. Where did those stats about the 32 days?
This one here?
No, the one before that. Yep, that one.
Yep.
32 days and average cost per day. Where are those stats from?
There's a paper that I've referenced in the readings and references that you can go download and have a read through.
Beauty. Thanks so much.
So it's good for a case study, or good for supporting your business case internally. Okay, so then we've got things like one company lost $44 million through email scams. So this is where I mentioned before the business email compromise side of things, where people are essentially pretending to have a relationship with your organization. They're pretending to be a partner, and they're sending invoices, and the company just pays them. So that again comes back to not just the technology side of things. It's your it also integrates back into your purchasing policies and how you actually pay people and validate that people are the right people to pay. So you would think that people, and also there's 7% since it was announced as well. So there's some impacts, and even the biggest companies in the world are not immune. So Google and Facebook were phished for over $100 million in fake invoices as well. Their sort of case study goes on to say that they managed to get that money back, the bulk of the funds back. But as you can see, it's not just small companies. I mean, $44 million and not noticing that that's gone out until it's, gone, is, these are big companies that are getting affected by this stuff, as well as small companies and individuals. So this was a good one where the FBI, so this was another focus on the business email compromise scams. And they were just saying that essentially they've tracked $2.3 billion in losses in the US, and that's just FBI from federal cases. Okay, so the end game that we play. This one here is really interesting. It's from, I think it's from Brian Krebs. Let me go back. It's a screenshot from his website, and it shows you the automation that people have in these systems. The malicious actors that are working on phishing scams can be highly organized. So it's an organized crime ring, for example, right down to, individuals and what they call, script kiddies, for example, who have purchased little scripts and, are sending out emails out of their, basement with a mail server, for example. So the sophistication ranges, but these here shows you some examples of software where essentially once they've got your account, they can plug it in, go through, do a little bit of a check on your account and see, is it valid? Does the password work? Can I actually make a test transaction to a credit card, for example? So these things are out there for these malicious actors to buy and use. So you don't even have to have really technical skill to do this. And let me just say that I'm not endorsing that anybody goes out and does this. Definitely not. This here is another screenshot from a dark web website. So this is part of our lab for this week. I want you to go on to a dark web website. I've provided sort of 3 examples. And if any of the URLs don't work, just let me know, because the URLs for dark web websites do tend to change around as they aim to avoid capture from the police and federal people. So,
so Bianca, just on that,
yes,
I think I've buggered up the uploading of the lab instructions where some links do work and some links don't. So,
okay.
Well, maybe you and I'll have a look at that maybe after this and then re-upload it. So those of you who have downloaded the lab instructions already, I'll send out a reminder with the recording that comes out with an email and say, all right, well, now it's good to download.
Yep. Yeah, so the problem is that, first of all, dark web websites are generally not too easy to find. You have to have a little bit of knowledge. And second of all, they tend to change their URLs. And they're not nice URLs like, mycompany.com. They're, usually a mixed match of different letters, .onion, for example. So you can see here the type of products that are for sale. This is a screenshot I took probably a couple of months ago, I think. And it looks essentially like I was going to say something about a particular online marketplace, but it's like an evil marketplace where they're selling everything from bank accounts to PayPal accounts, eBay, Amazon, credit cards. They can fake documents for you. Yeah, so it's all up there and it's all for sale. And you can see here, it's interesting from the perspective that, it is like a marketplace, and they are marketplaces where people actually give feedback and ratings of the quality of the data that these people are selling about you. So you can see sort of the top line there, one of the people, if I get my little annotator, but one of the people has essentially got a 4.9 ratings, star rating out of, 5. So he's obviously a good quality seller. And that's what these, just from a dark web perspective, these sellers live and die by their ratings. So, they want to give good quality data, otherwise they just don't sell what they've got. So just a little note, because in the, when you do go visit the dark web in the virtual machine that I've asked you to download from the fantastic Michael Bazell website, who does open source intelligence gathering. You'll notice on the left-hand side here, we've got a number of different categories. There's, drugs and services and software and malware and digital goods and there's pornography as well. So if you're sensitive to any of that sort of stuff, you don't have to do the labs. It's just for your interest only. You can just look at these screenshots here, for example. But it is interesting from the perspective that I just say, and I do say in the labs, if you are going to jump on and you don't want to see any of that stuff, just follow the instructions in terms of, you know, just clicking straight down to fraud and accounts or something like that to have a look at the types of accounts that are up for sale this week. So you sort of skip all that other stuff. This is a detailed listing of some data that's for sale. So for example, it's got a fantastic kitty cat, and everybody loves kitty cats, well, except the dog people. You know, I don't know why that's there, but you know, whatever. Obviously gets people to click and have a look at what he's got for sale. And this guy's got, for example, Illinois driver's license PSD, so that's a certain file type scans, and you can order your own driver's license. These couple here, there's one on the left and one on the right here. So this one has verified. Remember back to those tools that I showed you before. PayPal accounts with bank and credit card attached. And I'll show you one more screen after this as well. And this one's got Bank of America data that's, you know, he's got 13 pieces for sale. He sold less than 10 pieces, and he'll have a replacement time of 30 minutes if any of those accounts fail to log in for you. So it really is a business, and here you usually buy in sort of the anonymous, or so-called anonymous transaction currency of Bitcoin, for example. Here's another one with the LinkedIn records. I mean, this person's trying to sell what's already out there publicly on a lot of sites now. So, but they have essentially saying they've got 164 million records in plain text, so it's not obfuscated or encrypted, so of email addresses and passwords, and they've got 100% satisfaction guarantee. So yeah, just another example of the sort of data that's out there. So Guy, let's have another little poll and find out from people what they think the information is worth on the web. So once your data is out there, how much do you think, for example, which one do you think sells for the most money? Do you think it's iTunes, Gmail, or Twitter accounts? So we'll just wait for those polls to come through. Lots of voting going on.
Not much love for Twitter.
Oh, poor Twitter.
Also, folks, I reckon there's only probably about 5 or so slides left, and we'll try and answer as many questions as possible. There's quite a few there. So we'll probably run another, I don't know, 15 minutes. So just to let those of you know if you've got to go somewhere. And the recording will incorporate the questions at the end as well. We'll have that on the course page within 24 hours. So we've had this poll open for a minute, and pretty much a 50-50 split.
It's very close. So we're looking at people think that Gmail and iTunes sell for the most on the dark web. Looks
like I made a mistake with the settings of that, because we've got 114% at the moment. So it looks like I've made multi-choice, but that's okay. Still 50.
That's all right. Vote away.
50% for Gmail and iTunes, and 15 for Twitter. So there you go.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look. We've got our little piggy bank here, and essentially iTunes sells for the most in the report that I downloaded. There's some interesting, I'll post up during the week another link to another report that recently came out around how much data sells for. And I think that came out sort of last week or very recently. So it wasn't incorporated in the notes, but I'll post it up on the discussion forum. But you know, the people that undertake these research reports, they go out and they have a look at those dark web websites like I just showed you, and essentially analyze the data and come up with these figures. So the good news is, if you're in eHarmony and looking for love, your account is worth the most at dollars. So they like to target the relationships. And then right at the bottom, your Gmail and Yahoo account sells for only $1. Okay, so here's an example, another screenshot of PayPal accounts and the data that is sort of confirmed. So here you can see the account names. Let me just my little annotator thingy, my spotlight, so I can point at things. Here you've got the account names. and what type of account they've got in PayPal, Premier or Personal. The card has been confirmed, the bank account's been confirmed, what the balance is, and how much they're selling it for. So for example, this one's got a 0 balance and they're selling it for $3. That just gives you another example of the data. Okay, so we're getting very close now to the end. As I mentioned, the readings and homework for this week, have a look at those, post any question you've got on the forum, on the discussion forum. We've got in our lab, it's an online treasure hunt. So the first place you start is in your own mailbox. And what I would like you to do is find a phishing email in your mailbox. Hopefully that shouldn't be too hard, unfortunately. And post a screenshot, not the actual email. Please don't upload the actual email into the forum. And number 2 is a case study. And that's just see all the different type of variants that are out there. Sharing it, sharing is caring, I guess they say. Lab 2 this week is a case study. So find a public case study of a phishing incident, post the details on the forums. There's a few little pieces that I've asked you to identify in the lab. And then lab 3 is a virtual machine. So you download a virtual machine and get it ready to browse the web. It's pretty much all installed, all ready to go. It's just that the virtual machine that I've pointed you to is easy to use. It's already got the Tor browser, which is the particular browser that you have to, one of the particular browsers that you have to use to access the dark web. Is already installed and on there, and there's some anonymization protection inside of the virtual machine as well, preset by Michael Bazell. So that's why that's a good virtual machine to download. If you've already got your own virtual machine, you don't have to use ours, and you feel comfortable using it. It's got the Tor browser. By all means, go ahead and use it. I think someone posted a question about that recently on the forum. And then go have a little surf on the dark web and take a screenshot of some stolen data for sale and post it up so everybody can see what sort of data is out there and being sold. Finally, there's a website that I've set up specifically for this course called phishingcountermeasures.com, and there's lots of additional stuff that I couldn't fit in the actual course itself, as well as you can download the poster and stuff like that. So by all means, you can go jump on there, and I'll add stuff to that regularly throughout these next 5 weeks. Okay, so one little caution about the lab this week in particular, because we are surfing the dark web. Please do not click, open, or execute any links or attachments on suspect emails. So if you have a phishing email in your mailbox, don't click or open the attachments. We suspect it's a phishing email, please don't do that. Obviously, I do not want people to be infected as part of this course, and that's just, we're learning about phishing emails, and the best way to do that is actually to look at real phishing emails, but just be careful where your mouse travels. And then during week 1, lab 3, where you're actually going surfing the dark web, please don't run it on your employer's or corporate network. They may have rules, and you should investigate that unless you get specific permission from your manager or whoever needs to know. I would suggest not doing that. Don't buy anything. Please don't go buy stuff. Don't download or install anything from the dark web either. Don't communicate with anyone, and definitely don't disclose any details about yourself. Not that anything malicious is going to happen by you just having a little surf. That's why I've said for those particular things there, please don't do those things. To just protect yourself. Although it's in a virtual machine, things can leak, and I don't want people to go out of this course and find that they've been the subject of some sort of malicious activity. So that's my cautions. I recommend you don't do those things. It's totally up to you if you do them, but those are my cautions for the labs. Questions. So that's it. That we've reached the ends of the slides, and I'm happy to stay on and answer some more questions with you, Guy.
Thank you. There's heaps. And the chat's gone crazy as well, so I can understand why people who were having that issue would be upset by it. But a lot of the stories and the experiences and the insights are quite useful. All right, so we'll start with one that may or may not be particularly useful, but there's just quite a few questions about it. Questions about the GDPR. Whether that relates to what you're talking about, and whether you just have any general insights into that, and whether you can please describe to people more accurately than I could what the GDPR is.
Sure. So the GDPR is new legislation that came out in the European Union, and it's specifically for people that are residents of Europe, and it protects them and their data. So essentially, organisations have to put in place reasonable measures to protect their data. Now, I was actually thinking about this afternoon and thinking, how will phishing be actually, encompassed within this? Because say you're in Australia, one of your employees clicks a phishing email, some of your data gets breached. It included data of European residents, and then you have to report that back to the authorities there around that data has been breached and what was breached, etc. And then, where does the blame fall in terms of, it was a human error. Someone clicked on an email that they thought was a valid invoice, for example, and, data was breached. So it will be, because there's no I don't believe there's any practical case studies around that yet, because it's just so new. Maybe it's not even been fully implemented. Or I think people have been asked to comply by, and someone can correct me on this, by sometime in May, companies have been asked to make sure that they've got protections in place. It'll be interesting to see where phishing actually falls in that and where responsibility or blame is assigned. So that's, my sort of take on the GDPR.
Thank you. Does anyone still use Usenet for darknet stuff anymore from PB?
Usenet. I haven't seen it in my latest travels. There's a really interesting book that a research team wrote called the Dark Web Notebook, and they go through quite a lot of tools and forums and how to find them and things like that. So if you're interested, although this is not a dark web course, if you're interested in this, IT Masters, as part of the Masters program, actually do have this as a subject. And you can obviously go out and get some more information. I've been finding that Dark Web Notebook fairly interesting.
Okay, and like I said, Jason will be around next week to chat about how you can get involved with CSU. There's a lot of questions, but we'll get through as many as we can. Mohammed's asked about the ratings on slide 31. How can we trust those ratings? A lot of people saying, trust no one, trust nothing. This is the product slide. If you want to.
Product slide. Let's have a look.
31, I think.
31.
Couldn't the rating be a scam?
Oh, the ratings of the people in the side of the, right. So, so the ratings of the people inside here, absolutely. Everything can be a scam. These people are scammers. So it's like if there's a system to get around, people will find a way around it. Get their friends to jump on, buy the products, give them a good rating. People have been doing that on eBay, the early stages of it as well. So yeah, it's absolutely possible. And trust no one, trust nothing. Come out of security with a little sense of paranoia.
Beauty. Have you got the question icon open? Have you got the list of questions there?
Oh, let me have a look here.
If you click on that one, because there's so many questions, what I might do is I'll try and triage and type out any answers that I can. And then if you want to go through the questions and perhaps read the questions out and then answer them.
Okay, sure.
That'd be really handy.
Turn the lights off.
Great.
I really have to find a better way to deal with those lights.
We'll figure that out for next week.
In the meantime, it just adds a little sparkle to the whole thing.
Yep.
Okay, so let's see. Bruce has asked, I'd like to add a few general comments about the legal side of false billing. So if you want to add some comments, by all means, absolutely do that. Best place to do that is jump on the discussion forum, I think, and add it there, and I'll definitely jump in and have a look what you have to say, and I'm sure everybody else will be really interested in that. Let's see, in India, so PC001 has said, in India, they mix up the digital world with real world to carry out these scams, where they make a physical office available to collect money and ask depositors to make deposits and allocate online by claiming to provide Bitcoin and vanish from everywhere. I do not know whether such an instance will be part of this course. Not specifically as part of this course, but absolutely. It's not just all digital and it's not just all online. There's definitely, like you said, there's people with real offices They scam people. Even you know, you would think that people, for example, don't fall for the Nigerian scams anymore. But as part of those scam watch stats that I mentioned earlier, the money, so I think it was $90 million that was scammed out of Australians, almost 2 million of that was Nigerian scams. So even the oldest type of phishing scams are still, you know, are still valid and obviously, you know, pulling in some money. You know, it just depends, and we'll sort of touch on this in week 3. There's lots of stuff around, you know, people's experience and their, you know, a little bit around the psychology of how they dupe people. Yeah, and there's lots of different factors. We're going to go through all those factors in designing the good side of phishing and phishing simulations in your corporate environment. So let's see, as Luke's asked for the labs, is it okay to use Kali Linux instead of the recommended? Are we using any tools from the recommended one or mainly just for security virtualization tool? So for this week, we've got the download, which is an Ubuntu based virtual machine. Now, you can use that, or you can use your own if you're, as I mentioned before, if you've got your own sort of Tor instance and you want to use that, that's absolutely fine. But in week 3, our lab there is actually a virtualbox.ova file. Now, if you can convert that, and I'm not sure, maybe some of the more current technical people can tell me whether they can convert that into your own virtual machine, then by all means do that. But I have a feeling that you can't. Happy to be corrected on that. Let's see, Craig has asked, well, phishing is mostly email and SMS. Most people have their name on mobile message service. Have you heard of your name being recorded from a voicemail and used to accept over the phone acceptance signatures? Ooh, no, I haven't. That sounds very evil. So no, sorry, I haven't heard of that one. I have numerous times been approached or had SMS messages and phishing as well. People ringing up from the ATO, for example, that's the Australian Tax Office for people who aren't in Australia, and pretending that, you know, I've got a tax debt and all that sort of thing. But no, that's an interesting one. If you do have any case studies about that, by all means, pop it on the forum. It'd be interesting. Okay, Len has asked, are you aware of any typo squatting, yes, cousin domain services, other than DNS Twist that can assist with monitoring newly registered domains that may be very similar to those you wish to protect? If so, what is your experience with these? No, I haven't, although I might put the, I just make a note about that. I'll put the feelers out to our more tech guys here and ask them as well. And if anyone else has some feedback on that, by all means, post your ideas onto the forum and help Len out with that one. Bruce has asked, what's ranking of local regional ISPs for spam and phishing? So let's see, what's the ranking of local regional ISPs for spam and phishing? You mean in terms of how much they let through versus how much can, like is blocked? And is there a ranking of those in terms of some are better than others? I'm not sure. I can find out about that one for you. I haven't seen anything, put it that way. They would all vary in terms of the technology that they have in place. Obviously, they're mail and spam filters. Some of the ISPs obviously have free software that they use, open source software, some pay for large subscriptions. So yeah, it would vary, but I haven't seen a ranking to answer your specific question. Will you be covering GDPR requirements? No, not in this course, apart from you know, what I just mentioned earlier in the in this session. Remy has asked, any idea how to train people to detect spam versus phishing? My users tended to report on any unsolicited emails. Thank you, Remy, you're not alone. It is a large problem, and the issue is that obviously it is really hard to give people any tools, and some of these tools I'm going to cover next week, because there's some caveats around using them that they may not, you know, being at a particular technical level, may not understand. Yeah, it's really quite hard. So because email can look like it's completely innocent, and it's just a spam email. You know, someone from marketing has gotten hold of your database or been sold your credentials from a marketing firm, versus malicious phishing. So I'll go through next week some of the tools. I personally think for any fantastic developers out there, there's amazing opportunity for someone to develop a really simple way for people to identify spam versus phishing emails. So if anyone's out there and keen to develop that tool and you actually do it, contact us. I'm sure you'll have a crowd of people, a line of people waiting to buy it. So Ryan has asked, in my experience, callers either conjure a long-winded, elaborate lie regarding your family, which will end up asking for money, or hang up after the beep. In theory, if they already have our information, what's the purpose of calling SMS in the first place? Can you elaborate on that? So I had a really interesting discussion with one of the people who essentially hack and phish people for a living on the good side of things. And, you know, you sort of look at some of these phishing and scams, and he believes that they're targeting the essentially the lowest common denominator, the people that would, you know, fall for these things. If you sound a little bit, you know, like you know what you're talking about, then they just hang up and they know you're not an easy target, and that's why they don't go through with it. Whereas other people, you know, sometimes they're targeting or looking for the easy targets, like, for example, elderly people who might not be quite savvy about stuff. You know, I can think about my mum and dad, and I've had to train them on, you know, emails and phone and all that sort of thing, and SMSs as well, just to make sure that they're not clicking. SMSs, though, are a little bit different to voice calls in that they can send you off to a malicious link and install malware on your mobile device. So that would be the purpose there in terms of sending you an SMS. Okay, Mr. Anonymous or Miss Anonymous has said.
Sorry, Bianca, I'll just I'll jump on. I'm gonna just get rid of any questions asked in the last couple of minutes. We'll just go through the ones that are already there. Yeah, so just to let people know, any future questions we won't be answering, but we'll just get through the ones that are left. Yeah, and if you do have any more questions, please feel free to chuck them on the forum. You know, they're a great place to have these discussions too.
Sure, absolutely. Like I said before, I'm not the sole person who knows everything about this stuff, and everybody's experiences is valuable and perspective. So by all means, contribute on there and ask your questions. You'll have plenty of responses from lots of people who are really interested in this subject as well. So Anonymous has said, if my email and identity is used in a phishing attack, what is my recourse? In Australia, so I don't know if you're in Australia or not, there's an interesting service, and it's called, if I think about it, I will write a note to remind myself of what it's called and post it on the forum. But there's a ID protection service that you can actually go to. They've got trained psychologists who can actually help you through, you know, the you know, mental side of this thing, but also they can help you get your life back, essentially, in terms of if your identity was stolen. So I want to say it's something ID, but I'll definitely find the website, and I'll post it up onto the forum and let you know what that is. But there are those sorts of services that are starting to come out that help people get around these. But obviously, also you're contacting the vendors. For example, if your bank account was, you know, taken, you'd work with your bank, obviously, to try and get that money back as well. So that's that one. Rob has asked, the ScamWatch graph trended highest in August. Any thoughts as to why that time of year? Not specifically, although in saying that, and it doesn't trend with August, but a popular, obviously, time, apart from, you know, issues around, you know, there's an event like something that needs a humanitarian effort, public holidays, or, you know, holidays like Christmas, things like that, tend to get influxes of phishing that go with that. Obviously, and this is what we'll cover in week 3, they're aligning to what is relevant at that point in time. So in August 2017, I couldn't tell you, but it'd be interesting to to know why that was, or whether there's an anomaly potentially in the data in terms of how they assigned the amounts of scams. So whether they just assigned it to August, even though it happened in another month, for example. Okay, Dave, aside from having security awareness program, modify default configuration of products by email any phishing providers is also a great way in reducing percentage of such email coming into the organization. Absolutely, Dave. So one of the email poster, one of the countermeasures on there was essentially modifying, setting up your email anti-phishing services. Also, the basic stuff, basic stuff that everybody should be doing in terms of patching. For example, some malware is taking advantage of vulnerabilities that have been, available for patching for, months. But, those things aren't being patched. So patching, reducing access to administrator user accounts, so not letting everybody in the world in your company have an administrator account, so that they can't execute particular things, such as, like executables and scripts, for example. Configuring group policy if you've got Active Directory to restrict various things like macros from running automatically when they open up their Word documents or Excel documents or whatever it might be. All that basic stuff that, should be things that you look at first. And they're often things that will take some resource. But for example, patching, it may not take a lot of funding to actually implement, and it's one of the better ways to just get, your house in order and protect against, even if a phishing attack did happen, that, it doesn't get far or it doesn't get anywhere at all. Okay, so another question here, how the impact of GDPR to call centers to get contacts as before with data share of other companies, for instance, where the customers accept their sharing their personal information for marketing purposes as phone numbers, emails, and so on. Not exactly sure about that because I'm not a specialist in GDPR, but maybe someone else on the forum could answer that one for you. How effective are spam traps at detecting phishing emails? So let's see, spam traps in terms of the might just want to clarify this one, whether it's in terms of, for example, setting up a honeypot, or whether it's in terms of spam traps at your email and anti-malware provider, for example. So if you want to just clarify that one for me, I can elaborate on that one. Is it possible to check if my emails are on the dark web or not? The dark web is typically not easy to search in terms of, for example, if you wanted to search for a specific email address or on the dark web, it's usually not, they tend to sell their data in bulk. So they're not going to give you a preview of, there's like 100,000 accounts that I've got here. Can you go search and find if my email address is in there? They're definitely not going to do that for you generally. There was an interesting scam that was going on recently, and I want to say it's from, not recently, so I think it was last year, and I believe it was Medicare, but someone could correct me if I'm wrong, where you could essentially request them to look up your details or look up a specific person's details, and the initial thought was that that was actually, a phishing attempt. Or like the data had come from phishing attempt, but it turned out, I believe, that they had an inside person who would essentially look at your details, and then you give them particular pieces of information and they'd go look up the database. So that's not good, obviously. Insider is another threat, obviously, to insiders is another threat to cybersecurity, which we won't touch on here, but it is another area that you do need to cover off.
Cam's come in and asked about, and clarified, sorry, that it was about honeypots, that previous question.
Oh, okay, right, yep. So I have to say, I'm not an expert on honeypots. So I couldn't give you a definitive answer there. I think they're used more in research, and they do take time and effort to set up. And my understanding is that the honeypots are, the problem is there's so much variation out there in terms of the types of emails and who they fake themselves to be from and all that sort of thing. You're in a never-ending catch-up situation where you're constantly trying to chase these people down. So I think they have their limitations, put it that way. But if anyone has specific experience around that, by all means, put your hand up and post something in the forum. Okay, so let's see, next one. Nick, Bianca, are there any stats on the proportion of phishing attacks using ransomware? Is there a particular ransomware type of email, invoice, or something else? Okay, so ransomware has definitely become more popular in the past sort of like 3 to 4 years in terms of a method. Let's see, I think I do have a report, I'll dig it up, around ransomware. And I don't believe it touches on the proportion of phishing attacks. The issue with any of these statistics, like there's some good statistics sites out there. I've pulled some of them together and mentioned them in various references and readings for across the few weeks. The problem is it's often a vendor-specific view of the stats, and some of the data obviously they're not going to release for public purview. So. But let me just double check. I'm pretty sure I saw something in my my research database around that. Barbara, can't access the website. Microsoft Forefront doesn't allow it. I could say something about Microsoft, but no. Okay, so can't access. I'm presuming you mean the Phishing Countermeasures.com website. And if it's Microsoft Forefront, perhaps it's a blocking mechanism. But if anyone else has the same issue, by all means, let me know.
Yeah, really handy if you're having technical issues, if you chuck it on the forum, and that way we keep a track of the posts, and if many people are having the same issues, then we know it's something we have to fix. So any technical errors you do have, just chuck it in the forums and we'll sort them out.
Yep. So someone's asked why the rabbit ears Bianca for reasonable measures. I have no idea. Not sure. Rabbit ears. Okay, so Len has asked, by simply establishing presence on the dark web, will that put you on a monitor list or raise your online profile? Those of the more suspicious of us could say that, for example, there are definitely governments that monitor Tor endpoints, so where the data exits, for example. I think the default configuration in the virtual machine that's actually set up is set to be so that that machine is not an endpoint. But if you mean by establishing a presence in terms of if I just go on there and do the lab, it's unlikely. If you actually go on and do some of the things I recommended you don't do, then maybe it's a possibility. Greg, many economies report that over 10% of energy use are required to operate the internet. Some reports indicate that 90% of traffic is malicious. Doesn't this represent a large fraction of GDP? I have to agree with you, Greg. There's a huge amount of energy and waste of resources that are put towards spam overall, as well as phishing traffic. If you go talk to any of the the email vendors, they will tell you that, for their customers, they block a huge amount of traffic before it even reaches the inside of the organization. So yes, absolutely, that does contribute to the impacts at a broader level. Rob, is there a way to open a suspected malicious email attachment, PDF, docx, etc., to check for any personally identifiable information without actually opening the file or uploading it to a site like hybrid analysis, so you can protect the data of the clients inside? One moment. Okay, so for the suspicious email attachment, next week we're going to go through lots of different tools you can use to sort of safely preview the file and the data that's in it, for example, or at least identify whether that file is malicious, so that you don't have to actually go in and open it up. Okay. Ryan has asked, some Google Chrome extensions are disabled, deleted recently, especially for VPN services. Does this mean these applications are legitimate, or is it all a scam? There's definitely malicious apps on Google Chrome. Apple have had numerous apps that have been taken off, even though, you know, these organizations, some of them, Apple in particular, have a very extensive review process. Sometimes things can slip through. So definitely there's malicious apps out there in everything, browser extensions, Apple, Android. There's some great examples, which if you remind me, I'll post up around some news articles around, you know, I think it was last year, late last year, there was about 100 or so different Android apps that were taken off. And they were really innocent applications, like it's Dress Your Dolly, like a Barbie type application. And so they're being downloaded by kids and installed on, you know, they're thinking, oh, you know, I've got a cute little application and I can play it and dress up my dollies. And they're actually downloading malware. So they're, as I said before, one of the outcomes of working in cybersecurity is being a little bit paranoid and suspicious of everything. So someone said just on GDPR, no additional details there. So last one.
No, sorry, Bianca, that was about the previous question about bunny ears.
Oh, right. Oh, what did I do with bunny ears on GDPR? I'm not sure. Did you see something?
No, there was a question, why the bunny ears? Is it for, hang on, we can find it.
I think I did this in the air. Yes?
Ah, right, okay.
Yes, right, they're saying yes. I can't remember what it was about though. What did I do when I said GDPR?
No idea. Alrighty.
Okay, so last question was, taking reasonable measures. Okay, so yes, I totally get you now what you're talking about. So I said reasonable measures in bunny ears. Yes, I did. And the reason I said that was because it's really obscure as to what reasonable measures are. In the way that they've written the legislation is that reasonable measures could be construed in multiple different ways. So that's why I sort of put the bunny ears around it in terms of reasonable measures, but what does that mean? You know, the interpretation is there for the court to decide. No worries, I said thanks. Okay, so Craig has asked, and sorry that I was doing bunny ears quote marks in the air for people who are watching at home, or not watching at home because they can't see me on video. So actually Eva has a point. Last question, can your ISP record your public IP when you go to the dark web and get ASIO calling you? Yes, they can, is the answer to that. But the likelihood of that, of doing that, if it's the likelihood of doing that, unless you're doing something actually malicious, you know, they've got immense amounts of data to trawl through. So, you know, once they start correlating activity, I'd say is when you might get the call, when you're doing something actually malicious. But yeah, your public IP can be obtained in multiple different ways, even if you use a VPN sometimes. And some VPNs are not effective, so just keep that in mind. Okay, and last one, Gillian's just said, first time I've ever heard air quotes called bunny ears. Is that an Easter thing? It must be. But I love it.
Alrighty. What have we got next week, Bianca?
Okay, so next week we've got, next week we're focusing on email. So we get a little bit more technical, but not too technical. So hopefully everybody can follow along. But again, ask questions if you need any help. We're going to go through a little bit of essentially touch on a little recap of what how email gets from A to B. And I do, a funny thing, I do have bunnies in that slide as well.
Excellent.
So speaking of Easter and bunnies, but that's just for a little bit of fun. So we're going to go through a little bit of a recap of mail servers and how they work, just so everyone's on a level playing field. And then we're going to go through lots of different tools you can use to analyze. So we sort of go through a little bit of an incident response process that you would use for phishing, and how you might analyze emails as they come into your organization to determine if they've already been reported as phishing or malware based.
Beauty. All right. Well, looking forward to that one. 3 weeks in a row, because Matt Constable's last webinar for the last short course featured dog pictures. This had cat pictures. Next week we've got bunny pictures.
That's
Should
right.
be more of it, I say. Anyway, thank you for a wonderful presentation, and thank you for spending so much time on the questions. That was really nice. And thank you to all of you students attending now, still attending, for hanging around and listening and asking those questions and sort of taking us on different tangents and avenues than we might have gone anyway. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and thank you very much. Thank you, Bianca.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye. Have a good night or morning.